Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids' teachers, their librarian, the principal of the school, and let them all know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcasts. We have a fascinating episode for you today. First up, Lynn Brunelle and Jason Chen, the author and illustrator of Life After Whale, are here to talk about the amazing ecosystem of a whale fall. It is a fascinating conversation, really, really fun. And Jason offers some really fantastic parenting advice to help inspire any young creative out there. We're also going to be speaking to Sandy Whiting. She is a speech and language pathologist in addition to being a children's author, and she is here to celebrate Meatball Man. Hey there, families. Are you looking for an exciting way to bond and learn together? Look no further than our STEM is Family Fun video series. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of STEM through hands-on activities right in your own home. Our series features lessons from experts at renowned institutions like the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, the National Children's Museum in Washington, D.C., and Children's Museum Houston. From making homemade rainbow bridges to creating an oboe out of a straw, there's something for everyone in the family to enjoy. So grab your lab coats and get ready for an adventure. Go to readingwithyourkids.com and click on the STEM is Family Fun link at the top of the page and let the learning and laughter begin. STEM is Family Fun, where learning and bonding go hand in hand. My friends, we are in for a treat. We have two amazing guests here today to celebrate Life After Whale, the amazing ecosystem of a whale fall. Please welcome from Washington State. She is the author, Lynn Brunelle. Lynn, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well.
I can't wait to start talking to you about this book. And joining us from the beautiful Green Mountain state of Vermont, the illustrator Jason Chen. Hey, Jason, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
Jason and I spoke a few years back on the Solve It for Kids podcast. And what I remember from that interview, Jason, is you love to draw things. I think the term is at scale. You love to kind of show how big things are and the contrast between things that are big and things that ain't so big.
Yeah, I did 2 books dealing with scale. So one book, the scale of astronomical things, galaxies and the universe, and one book dealing with microscopic things, so cells and molecules and all the way down to quarks.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit bigger than a quark, but not by much. Not by much. Lynn, tell us about Life After Whale, please.
It is a book that answers a question that I started wondering after I was wandering on the shore here. We had some whales passing by, and I thought, gosh, what happens? What happens when a whale dies? Where does it go? Some of them wash up. You don't see them. And so I started digging in and discovered that it's this remarkable sort of gift of nature when a whale finishes its life and then falls to the bottom of the sea. It starts a whole new ecosystem, which can last for decades, even centuries, where it allows thousands of different populations of creatures to survive and connect through food chains and food webs. And it only happens when a whale falls to the bottom of the sea. It's just remarkable. So that's what this book is about. It's about, it starts off as a story of a whale, and then she dies. And so it's the end of that story, but then it's the beginning of this whole new other beautiful story, which then reconnects at the end.
You know, I'm imagining there are people listening out here and thinking, putting themselves in the a life of the whale, and then thinking, oh, when I die, things get to eat me, and that's beautiful, but it kind of is.
It really is. I mean, it's the ultimate recycling, right? I mean, we're all made up of molecules and nutrients, and a blue whale being the biggest animal on the planet ever, you know, that's a pretty big banquet. And so when that falls to the deep sea, which is kind of sparse because there's not a lot going on down there, and there's not a lot of food except for marine snow, which sounds so pretty, but it isn't. It's like, you know, dead skin cells and poop and dead animals. It's not a lot to live on. So then, boom, when Thanksgiving lands on the bottom of the sea and secretes all these chemicals and sends out all these messages, then life starts to kind of come and find itself and weave together into these populations and communities which feed each other. And it's really kind of cool. And then eventually those nutrients that get broken down out of the whale's body then get sent back up into the stream, which feed phytoplankton, which feed other things, among them krill, which feed other whales. So it's this beautiful cycle.
Yeah. Jason, people weren't able to see that beautiful little ballet that Lynn was doing with her hands as she was describing. And it really was beautiful because it kind of demonstrates just everything that's going on. How were you able to illustrate that kind of cycle?
Oh, well, you know, my process always starts with, first it starts with the text. And then, you know, right after that, I start doing my own research, and visual research. You know, looking for photographs of whale falls, which, Lynn provided me with my first view of a whale fall from her research. She sent me the photographs. For this book, some of the research took me to Monterey Bay in California on a whale watch, seeking out also blue whale skeletons. So there happens to be one in Santa Cruz that I got to go visit. It's 85 feet long. One of the interesting things or the things that I like to do with illustration is try and make the invisible visible. You know, whether that be showing the reader what a blue whale looks like or showing a reader what the inside of a blue whale looks like, which is fascinating. I found it fascinating, and I think kids will too.
You know, Lynn, the inspiration for this book, you thinking about what happens to a whale when it dies, I love that that's how the book started, because I think that's something we can really have some great conversations with our kids about. It's, you know, because there's so much around us that we take for granted, or we just like, yeah, there's a whale. And we don't think about what happens when it dies, or, you know, anything else except when we see it jump out of the water or we read about it in a book. So I think that, you know, at the very least, sitting down and reading this book and exploring life after whale would be a great way to just inspire kids to go beyond and think, and just make it a habit of when you're driving to school, like, oh, we see that thing every day. Let's think deeper about it.
Absolutely. I think it's so much about it is every day changing the lens, just sort of shifting your lens just a little bit, because yeah, whales are cool, but then when you look deep and you look down and you think, wow, I never knew any of this existed. This is so amazing. And, you know, then you bring everything else it's connected into everything is part of this cycle. Everything is part of a web. Everything is part of these connected, intertwined, interwoven chains of sort of nutrient exchange, which doesn't sound particularly, you know, like, ooh, but it is. Actually, we are all incredibly connected. As Jason knows from his books, too, like, you know, we're all stardust. We're all We're all from that explosion back when that we don't know, we weren't there to see it, but we are it, we're kind of living it. So I do love that sort of interconnection between, you look at a whale, but you're kind of putting yourself in the picture too, like what we share, what we have in common with them, how we're connected.
Yeah. Jason, I'm curious, Lynn was telling us about when the whale falls, it kind of sends out signals to let everybody know that here I am, come eat, like McDonald's does their commercials. How did you illustrate that?
Oh, well, I think you're referring to the chemical signals.
Yes.
I'm correct. So I didn't illustrate the arrows or kind of try and visualize the chemicals going out. But that what I illustrated was that the first animal coming and exploring and finding the whale. And then you turn the page and a whole host of that fish's friends have followed it along, so that there's a page where it's kind of this moment of discovery of the feast that they're about to receive after the whale has fallen to the bottom of the sea. So that was I guess that was that moment in the story. There is a moment at the end where there are chemicals leaching out of the whale's bones, and I put a diagram there with an arrow that kind of indicates chemicals leaching out into the water, which is an important thing for the reader to conceptualize. And so I thought that diagram with the arrow was the best way to communicate that. Of course, it's important because that is the beginning of the nutrients coming back to the surface and ultimately feeding the next blue whale, which is how the story ends. So there are some diagrams throughout the book that illustrate some of the more abstract concepts or some of the things that were too hard to show because of scale. You're dealing with this gigantic blue whale, as well as these tiny creatures like sea scuds. So I use diagrams on the side of the main picture to help illustrate those.
Yeah. Lynn, this is obviously a book. If a mom, dad, grandparent, caregiver out there looking to excite their kids about the STEM field, this is a kind of a no-brainer. It would be a great addition to a family library. How did you develop your love of the STEM fields and exploring STEM fields and then talking about STEM fields with kids?
Well, I grew up in Maine, and we were in it was a suburb of Portland, but we had woods all around us and marshes. And so I just remember my brother and I, this was back in the day when we were just outside all day, no matter the weather, we were outside all day. And it was wonderful to discover the world. It was wonderful some days we would dig down and find rocks and break them apart and look at them. Some days we would climb trees. We would look up. Sometimes we would make rubbings of leaves. So always it's been about observing how amazing, the world is around me. It's funny when I look back on my career path, it all makes sense, but moving forward from when I was a kid, it's all over the place. One of my majors in college was biology, and then I went from, one of my first jobs was teaching. I taught behavior problem kids, back in the day when they pulled kids out of classrooms and put them all in one classroom. And that was my first teaching experience. I had 28 kids that were not able to be in regular classrooms, grade 4 through 8. And a couple of them were scary, but most of them were just the different thinkers, and it was the making of me in terms of communicating. There was one kid that was incredibly visual, but he had been labeled as someone who couldn't, sequence a story, but he could if he did it visually, and there was a girl who said, was told she wasn't, she was defiant. She wasn't, she just didn't want to look stupid, so she was angry, and there were all these ways of getting to music, drawing, humor, acting things out. So that was just such an eye-opening world to me to have that classroom of kids that kind of demanded a different way, a different avenue. And a lot of people, I find, I'm fascinated by science, but a lot of people are intimidated by it. And I think oftentimes it's because maybe they didn't have the best science teacher growing up. I mean, I know I didn't. I remember in third grade getting these little cardboard boxes of science kits, right? And they would be like, what floats? And inside there'd be a rock and a cork. That's not inspiring, right? And so just sort of knowing that there was a lack of that kind of, the difference between the amazing world of it and then a rock and a cork, what floats, is pretty big. So I went from that to being an art teacher, thinking that the art room would be, there are no wrong answers, and it would be great to pull art in to teach these other concepts. And then I went into publishing, same thing. And then I came out here to Seattle to work for a kids science show, which I loved, called Bill Nye the Science Guy. And it was a way to use humor and hands-on and different ways of getting at difficult content. And so that's always been my jam. So every time I think of a question, I'm like, okay, how can I make it fun and accessible, and available? Also just to let people know it is cool, because a lot of people just don't know that, right? And then you look at Jason's illustrations that make the world come alive in such a beautiful, vibrant way. It's like, oh my gosh, this book was really fun to work on.
Yeah. Jason, don't you love it that Lynn just said, and then I came out to Seattle work on this kid show, Bill Nye the Science Guy. It's like, no big deal.
Maybe you've heard of it.
Maybe. Jason, I'm wondering, do you it's obvious when Lynn is talking and her teaching background, and she's passionate about sharing these things, these ideas, and sharing her passion with kids. Are you, as you're drawing and creating your illustrations, your award-winning illustrations, are you conscious of the kid? Are you thinking, there's a kid in fourth grade who's in that class that you get pulled out of that class and because he can't sit still. Are you thinking of that kid, and I want to touch this kid with this illustration and help them really love what we're writing and creating here?
Yes, but that's not the only thing I'm thinking about. Mm-hmm. I think about clarity, right? And priorities for the image. So this image is of the whale, and it's at this stage of at the stage of decomposition and this particular ecosystem, and I want to show these animals. So figuring out an image that does that job, right, and communicates that clearly. And, then I think, what age of kid is going to be looking at this, and that might come into play for how clear and it needs to be. I think a lot about myself when I was that age. I think, artists are often writing for their 8-year-old self or their 10-year-old, writing or illustrating for themselves as a kid, and what would excite me. So, I think about what's going to make this dramatic or mysterious or funny, or, what emotion is going to drive this illustration and going to hook the reader. Those are, so, the age of the kid comes into play there as well. But a lot of the time I'm just thinking about, how am I going to make this look real? What's the anatomy? What research do I need? What color is this going to be? And it's, I don't know, it's a lot of problem solving, really. Mm-hmm. Pictures, a lot of problem solving.
Yeah. Kind of like an engineer.
Absolutely. I think artists and scientists, as Lynn alluded to, we kind of come from the same place. The arts and the sciences, it starts from the same impulse, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To observe the world, to understand the world, to connect with it and see connections, and maybe the painter expresses it differently than the research scientist. But we use a lot of the same kinds of thinking, the same kinds of tools, and processes. Yeah.
Lynn, I'm picturing this dad or mom that's listening to the show, and their kid is one of those kids that was in your class, and they know that the kid is smart, or as we say here in Boston, they know their kid is wicked smart. But the teachers can't see it. And how can that parent, how would you suggest that parent use a book like Life After Whale to, kind of rope the kid and get them excited about learning? I have a niece who is right now studying biomedical engineering, and we're so very close. We spend hours and hours talking, but when I try to talk to her about school when she was in high school, next subject, But now when she's starting to take the anatomy classes and things like that in college, boy, we sit down and we'll talk for hours about that stuff. So it's like that thing. If you can flick that switch in a kid, it's like it changes their life. I'm thinking that Life After Whale could change some lives out there. And if parents are seeing that, what should they take from that spark?
Well, gosh, I mean, that's like the hope, right? To get some kids or not even just a kid, anybody really, so fascinated with this that they pursue it. I think, again, it's just all in that effort of changing that lens, right? So, like, sometimes we just kind of go through with filters on, and we just kind of go through. Stopping and noticing and asking the questions, it all starts with a question. It all starts with curiosity and wonder, right? Like, what do you think happens when a whale dies? Like, what do you think happens to the body? And get in through that curious, like, I don't know, like, you're not going to get to, zombie bone-sucking worms from what happens when a whale dies until you get into the guts of the book, really, but it's in there, right? So it's like, start small with the questions and start small with the, things astounded me with this book, like how big really is a blue whale. Like, it's like, it's big, but then you don't really think of it. It's like 3 school buses long, and it's bigger than the biggest dinosaur. It's, what is it, 40 elephants stacked side by side, and then, what does that mean in a kid's world? Well, I mean, I suppose you could measure it against a football field, but you could also measure a kid's arm span and get in a classroom as many kids lined up as it is as long as a blue whale, and see how far down the hallway it goes or across the playground it goes, finding ways in, that just spark that curiosity, and then, hopefully it leads itself in. And sometimes that can backfire too. I would do that with my kids going to art museums. I would say, okay, scavenger hunt. We're going to find, a fox. We're going to find a lady with a pendant and blah, 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 blah. And I was so sure that this was going to get them to go and look at all these paintings. And they were like, you can't force it. You have to just tickle it, not hit them over the head with it, I think.
Yeah. Maybe some parents, instead of saying, hey, I got your new book, it's called Life After Whale. If they know their kids, they can say, hey, I got your new book. It's about bone-sucking worms. And
yeah, right. I mean, that's a hook right there, right?
Jason, one of the things that we encourage families to do with their kids is to, oftentimes with their young kids, take a picture walk through a book before they even read any of the text. Just take a look at the pictures and imagine what the story might be. I think that Life After Whale could be a great thing to do with Life After Whale. I also think this is a book you should absolutely take many picture walks through. Just, even after you have all that information, it's like, go back and take a look at it and like, wow, just see each illustration in a different way as you're learning more and more.
Yeah, I love that idea of doing a picture walk through and taking time to just observe and see what you see. I think that's wonderful. I think that's what I used to do with books, especially books that I had read. I'm thinking of the David Macaulay books about architecture, Castle, or The Way Things Work was a favorite of mine. But I would, just open up to any random page and devour the pictures. I already knew what was happening with the words, but I would just study the pictures and return to them and kind of read the books piecemeal. And I think that's fine.
Yeah.
It's great if that's the way the reader wants to engage with the book, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. For some reason, as you're talking about looking at these pictures and looking at them over and over again and examining them, see all the ins and outs. I remember doing that with the cereal box and, at the kitchen table every breakfast, looking at the same
Right.
cereal box for like 8 years.
Yeah, right? Maybe we should put our books on the back of cereal boxes.
Hey, that's not a bad idea.
That would be a great idea. Great idea. Lynn, you were mentioning the scale and just thinking, I had a flashback to, I visited the Panama Canal but in a little motorboat. We took a river cruise and then we went out into the canal, into the lake that forms the biggest part of the canal. And we're riding alongside this giant tanker, freight tanker. And I'm like, I'd never seen, it was like they took the Empire State Building and put it horizontal and floated it down the canal. It's, I think you're right when kids just see that scale. I remember, in my job as a performer, being in very close proximity to elephants and just like being overwhelmed at how big they are.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think, yeah. And there's a difference between hearing the word big and then seeing it,
Mm-hmm.
or being it, or, making it, right? Drawing even a chalk line on the playground, draw a 90-foot chalk line. And that's like, there's your blue whale. It's like, that takes a lot of steps to get from one end to the other.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you think, krill is like the size of a segment of your pinky, and that's what they eat. That's also another really cool, remarkable thing.
Yeah. And just imagine how many they have to eat to grow that big.
Yeah. And a mouthful for them is enough krill to fill a school bus. That's a big mouthful.
That is a big mouthful. On the first glance, it's like Life After Whale. Oh, this is like a serious book, and we're going to learn so much. And yeah, we're definitely. But I think you could have an awful lot of fun with this book too, thinking about the school bus full of krill and how big it is, and all of that stuff. This is a book. We hear parents talk all the time. I got to read this book the 500th time. I don't want to making me crazy. But I think Life After Will is absolutely a book that kids are going, and parents are going to want to read over and over and over again in many different ways and talk about and have so many great conversations about.
I hope so. One of the big worries when I first wrote it was that, you start with this beautiful whale and then she dies, right? And everyone's like, oh, I'm like, no, but it's actually kind of cool because it bridges that connection between, she doesn't stop giving stuff. You know what I mean? Like, she lived this beautiful life and yet she's still like making a huge difference in the world. And that's something too that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about all the time, that there is a loopiness, if you will,
Yeah. Speaking about continuing to give, Jason, your art is going to be inspiring people. I'm curious, what advice could you give to a parent that they could share with their kid that is showing an interest in being a visual artist, that they might grow up and share with somebody else and on and on?
I give different advice to different age kids, but one of the things I've been thinking about lately is how to encourage kids to continue to make art and to encourage their interest, and I like the idea of instead of telling kids that you like their art or it's good, ask them questions about it and engage them in conversation about what they're making. I think that's a really good way to show that you support what they are doing without changing the focus to whether it's good or bad, because there's no such thing really as right or wrong in art. Lynn said that earlier. The value, I think, should be on the making it and the work they put into it. And so just asking questions about what they're doing and having conversations about it is great. It may be better than saying, "Oh, good job, that's so realistic," or whatever. Putting the value on it is, it can be detrimental in some ways.
Yeah, I really love that. We talk here on the podcast a lot about how empowering it is when you sit down with your 3 and 4 and 5-year-old and you say something as simple as, "What do you think about what's going on in the story?" When you're showing the kid that you value their judgment, that you're interested in how they're thinking. Sitting down with the kid and saying, like you said, and saying, "Oh, good job. Put it up in the refrigerator. Let's talk about this. What made you make this choice? Why? What's going on here?" That's super, super advice. We should tell everybody where we can go to find out more about life after whale, the amazing ecosystem of a whale fall. So, Jason, we'll start with you. Where can we go to find out more about you and this book?
I have a website, jasonchin.net, which has all my books and links to social media as well. And this book is published by Holiday House. So the Holiday House website is where you can go to find the book and where to buy it.
Awesome. Lynn, what about you? Where can we go to find out about life after whale and maybe find out about that little kid show you were part of,
I have a website too, Lynn Brunelle, lynnbrunelle.com. And so you can find out about things there. I'm reworking it at the moment, so I'm going to put more activities in for kids and also for parents and teachers to use too with some of the books that I've done. As Jason said, it's Holiday House, Neil Porter book, who was another remarkable individual to work with. I do have to say that the collaboration on this book was astounding, in my opinion. Jason's research, my initial research was in Monterey Bay, and I talked to the actual scientists that were the ones that kind of discovered whale falls. They weren't sort of known about until about 1980s because people couldn't see at the bottom of the sea, And then Jason took his research just that much. He just upped it so much more. So he, that kind of fed back into the writing and made the writing clearer too. And I just thought it was a great collaboration. I think we made a good team, Jason.
Yeah. Well, it was so fun to illustrate. I mean, the text is beautifully done, especially that transition you were talking about from the blue whale to when it dies, and this transition to life after whale is just remarkable. And I had a great time illustrating it.
Wow. Folks at Holiday House, they want to work together. Bring them back. Bring the team back for another book.
All right.
We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Life After Whale, the amazing ecosystem of a whale fall. Our guests have been Lynn Brunelle and Jason Chen. My friends, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks.
It was fun.
Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Join us right now from the western part of the great state of New York. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new book. It is called Meatball Man, Head Detective, Case of the Missing Pepper Shaker. Please welcome to the show, Sandy Whiting. Hey, Sandy, how are you?
Hi, good. Thank you so much for having me on.
If I were more clever, I would have said, hey, Sandy, what's shaking? But I wasn't, so we lost it. So tell us about Meatball Man. I mean, there was a time in my life where I was Meatball Man, so I'd be real interested to find out about this.
So Meatball Man is the head detective in Town City, and he works with his fellow detectives and best friends, Cheese Stick and Breadstick, and they live in Town City. They, keep the streets safe. Kind of used to doing the same old until Sally the salt shaker comes barging in one day, shedding tears of salt all over the place, trying to find her husband missing Petey the pepper shaker.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So
this is really, really cool. I love the idea. It sounds like a lot of fun. I'm imagining that if I was still reading to my kids, they're 30 and 27 right now. I can't get them to sit down on my lap anymore. But I'm imagining we'd have a lot of fun grabbing the pepper shaker and maybe grabbing one of my meatballs after it cooled off a little bit and kind of acting out the story.
Yeah. So what's funny about that is, that's actually how Meatball Man came to be. I have two kids, 5 and 7. And one night at dinner, we were eating spaghetti and meatballs. And we were kind of talking about the day and some of the things they had read in school and just some books at the library. And we decided to come up with our own story. And I said, oh, what about a meatball that was a detective? And my son had a breadstick and garlic bread next to him. And we're like, oh, yeah, how about this? And we're acting it out. And that's where the idea of Meatball Man came from.
Pretty cool. I love that. I think that's such a great activity to do with your kids. Even if you don't have any aspirations to be a published author yourself, it's just the act of sitting down with your kids and thinking, what if this meatball came to life and it was a detective? And it's so much fun. And, it's something, I think one of the things, it's something that you can do with your kids where you're on kind of like the same level. You're both just using those imaginations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so, like you said, it's just so fun too. It's so fun. It's creative. Right before I logged on to this, actually, my son came over with one of his toys and he's like, I think I'm going to make a story about a friend who moves away and comes back and is a transformer. But how would I know? How would they know it's the friend if he has a mask? And then that opens up all of that dialogue too of just problem solving, and you get to get the kids involved, and kids are just so creative. Their imaginations are incredible. And so it's a really, really fun way to do that. It's just taking an object that you have at home, whether it be a toy or a meatball at dinner time, and coming up with a story. It's tons of fun.
That's one of the things, I've told this story before. One of the, I worked in human services for a long time before I started performing, and I worked at a school for kids with severe developmental disabilities. And I had a background in social work, but I'd never worked with kids that had these type of disabilities. And I was really successful in my position there. It certainly wasn't because I had any kind of expertise. I think it was the opposite. It's because I didn't go to school and sit for 4 years with professors telling me, oh, these kids can't do X, Y, and Z. I just went in there and I saw a bunch of kids and they did things differently. But it's like, well, you're a kid, so you're going to like to swim. You're going to like to do this and that, and we'll figure out a way to make it happen. And it was an approach that none of the therapists and whatnot had taken before. And I think that can apply to a lot of different things in life, a lot of different jobs. And I think it's a great kind of skill, or it's a great thing to help our kids be aware of, because they might be able to solve problems that the experts can't.
Yep, for sure. And I see, with my kids or at work or, just out in the community too, I think at least what I've seen is a lot of that confidence level in kids too sometimes. Oh, I don't know if I can write a story, or I don't know if I could solve this problem, or I'm not sure. But by opening up and tapping into that imagination and creative, part, and showing them and encouraging them that, oh yeah, we can do this, and through a story. Kids love writing stories and doing that. And then I get to see the pride in the kids' faces too when they do that. I think, like you said, just meeting kids at the level that they're at and encouraging them is just so huge. Not talking down at them, but to them and with them. It's very, very powerful.
It certainly is powerful. Some of the, being 100, almost everybody in my life is a lot younger than me, and a lot of those great relationships I have, I think, were formed because I don't tend not to talk down to people. It's like, hey, let's figure this out. Let's figure out a way to have fun together.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, we were talking beforehand, in addition to being a kidlit author, you are also a speech and language pathologist.
I am, yes.
You were sharing with me that you've had a really fascinating career. You started working with infants at home. Then you worked with elderly folks and stroke victims in rehab situations. Now you're working in school districts with kids in school. I get with the newborns, you're trying to help them form words and learn how to speak. With the elderly and the stroke victims, you're helping them, again, relearn how to speak. What are we doing with the high school and middle school kids?
So high school and middle school. So I work in primarily the high school and middle school. And so speech is a really interesting field because people say speech, and a lot of times people think of articulation. So getting your R's produced right.
Wait a minute. Wait. I'm sorry. I have to stop you here.
Okay.
Was that like a Freudian slip? You're talking to somebody from Boston, and then you have to go with, we got to teach them how to say R.
The Boston R, right? Yes, the Boston R. That's what I say to my kids sometimes. So, besides the Boston R, no, we do. Speech is so interesting because, yes, there's the disfluencies and stuttering, but a large part of speech that I work with in the middle and high school is social skills back and forth. So turn taking, conversational skills, language. So figurative language, making predictions in text, memory. If somebody reads you a paragraph, can you remember the details and organize them? So I do a lot of work with that, actually.
That is really fascinating. I have, and it was much worse at one time in my life, a speech impediment. I have a difficult time with certain letters, and it really rears this ugly head when I get very tired, or as we say here in Boston, and when I get wicked tired. And thankfully, a speech therapist, Mr. Wallenus, back when I was in kindergarten and first grade, helped me a great deal. And ironically, he had a terrible stutter, and it's very difficult for him to form words and to get sentences out. But he helped me figure out how to speak, and I wonder if he's still around and could hear that I'm a podcaster now. But anyways, it's fascinating that I don't think that, and certainly I didn't think that, the interacting and knowing when to talk and how to share and memorizing what we're hearing, that's all part of that same speech thingy that goes on in our brains.
Yeah, it's all under the umbrella of what speech therapy can work on and target. And I think it's definitely something that I'm always kind of explaining what falls under the realm, because there's so many things that do, which is part of what makes my job so awesome. And I love it that I get to do all those different things too.
Yeah, yeah. I remember very vividly when my son was in middle school. And I'm one of those sneaky parents. I would always volunteer to drive the kids around because I knew sitting up front in the minivan, I would just hear everything that was going on at school. Stuff my kids would never tell me. It would just come out. But I noticed with the guys, they were talking. The conversation never the talking never stopped. They weren't really having a conversation. They were just waiting for each other to stop talking and take a breath. So that, and you know, Tommy's talking about raspberries, and then Joe talks about nuclear physics, and then Chris talks about something completely. There was no give and take back and forth. It was just we're taking turns speaking. Is that just a middle school thing, or is?
I don't know. I think I see it ever. We would be working on remaining on topic, I suppose, if we were in a session. But I think that, I don't know, I see it kind of everywhere. But I'm from that Italian family, too, where someone talks loud and then the next person talks louder and the next person talks louder. And we might be changing topics all the time. So I don't know if I'm the best one to really say.
Now, before we started recording, Sandy and I am very familiar with the area of New York that she lives in and works in. And Kodak, the old Kodak company, for young people, we used to have to take pictures with the camera, and there would be film in it. It would have to get developed. And we're talking about how Kodak has kind of, it's still there, but they kind of been taking, made obsolete by digital cameras and whatnot. And there was a question I was going to ask you, and I wanted to hold it for the podcast here. I hear Elon Musk talking about one day that everybody's going to be fitted with this neural link, and that we're not going to have to speak. We'll be able to read each other's minds.
Oh.
And as Sandy looks terrified,
Oh.
it is kind of. I'm wondering if we ever get to that kind of point. And I think I know the answer from what we've been talking about. Will there still be a need for speech pathologists? Someone to help people organize their thoughts. I would be terrified for somebody who was able to read my mind.
Me too. Yes. So that's kind of scary. I think definitely first off, not being able to talk. I don't know. There's a lot that goes there as a speech therapist. Just learning. That's how we learn. That's how we get information. We intake things by listening to people around us too. That's how we learn and how we develop. So, that's kind of a scary thought there. But also, like you said, the organization of the brain, that's absolutely something that speech therapy also looks at too. So,
that's really fascinating. Hey, again, we're gonna get back to talking about Mr. Meatball or Meatball Man. I'm sorry.
You're good.
But I'm just curious. One of the things I notice, I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I've spent a lot of time by myself in Spanish-speaking countries, performing, needing to get around. When I'm in those situations, I try to think in Spanish, think in the language. And I find myself, when I'm in that mode, looking at the world in a slightly different way. And I've always encouraged people to try that just because I think it's fascinating. Is that just my imagination, or do you think there's something to that the language and the words that we're using help shape our perspective?
Oh, I think that they definitely do. And I think just even thinking about words like purposefully and then like all about the word, right? Like, so like, what is its function? What does it do? What does it look like? Your senses heightened, all of those things about it just helps us learn the word, the language better and learn more around it. If we can immerse ourselves in language, the more that we learn, the more that we know. So yeah, I think there's definitely a link there too.
Yeah. Now back to Meatball Man and our delicious mystery here.
Yes.
Do you plan on making this a series?
I do. So this is the first. I already have a couple chapters of the second one in the works. My kids are part of the brainstorming process, so they help with that. We sat down one day, took notes, and kind of jotted out some drawings of the characters. So yeah, we're working on it, and my son really wants me to make a zombie Halloween Meatball Man, so we'll see how that works out.
That could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
That could be pretty cool. That could be. Any danger of Meatball Man being eaten at some point in the series?
I still have not figured out the whole food thing yet. I'm still working on that, of what they eat. They don't eat anything in the first one right now, so we're still working on that.
Well, I just returned from visiting the International Children's Book Festival in Bologna, Italy. And
Awesome.
try as I might, I did not find a meatball on any menu in all of Bologna.
Oh, what? That's surprising.
Every region I've been told has their own kind of dishes. In Bologna, it's bolognese sauce and lasagna, and so I had delicious bolognese and every night I was over there.
That's interesting, though.
Yeah.
I would have thought they'd have meatballs.
I would have too, because I was going to, because I've been a connoisseur, and not those little Swedish kind of meatball sized things. When I make them, I make these giant meatballs, and they're just delicious. It's what a gift to the world.
Yes.
So how have you changed now that you are an author? The book will be officially published in a few weeks from the night that we're recording this. But has it kind of changed the way you think of yourself?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think there's so much for me to learn and grow, and I just feel really honored and really blessed that I'm able to have my words out into the world soon. So, I feel very, very lucky, and very honored. So that's great. But I just, keep reading, keep writing, keep using my imagination too. Because you never know what kind of stories will pop in there too. So
there you go.
Yep.
There you go. And keep collaborating with your kids.
Absolutely. And I teach I had a creative writing club at the library where I work too. And I'll tell you, that is one of the coolest things that I do, is just to see a bunch of middle schoolers in a room get really excited about different topics, and they're all helping each other, trying to come up, oh, you could have the character do this, and oh yeah, their name could be this, and brainstorming together. It's just, there's a lot that can be learned from children too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we should learn where we can go to find out more about Meatball Man, Head Detective, Case of the Missing Pepper Shaker, and find out more about you.
All right, great. Well, Meatball Man is available for pre-order, but it might be out when this airs. But you could go to Amazon, or Barnes & Noble, or Walmart, any of those websites. And then I can be found on Twitter and Instagram. And I do have a Linktree site. So yeah, it'd be great to connect with more readers and writers too.
That will be fantastic. We've had a fantastic, delicious time speaking to the author of Meatball Man, Head Detective, Case of the Missing Pepper Shaker. It is the brand new book from our guest, Sandy Whiting. Sandy, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Until then, please be sure to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter or X. And we have a great YouTube channel. You heard us talking about our Drawing with Your Kids and Stimulus Family Fun projects. You can find all those videos on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And, of course, we'd love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can find a link to all the episodes in the show, almost 2,000 episodes of the show. You can also find a contact button so you can send us a message. letting us know what you love about the show, letting us know what we could be doing better, and letting us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guests, Lynn Brunelle, Jason Chen. Be sure to check out Life After Whale. And, of course, Sandy Whiting. Check out Meatball Man, head detective case of the missing pepper shaker. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Judy Hu. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of her support, but most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.